to meet these people? What was your technique early on to connect with these
Oh man,
sort of big names?
I'm gonna give you my secret sauce, huh? Honestly, LinkedIn. And that's a big hack that I've learned throughout the years is I connect with people on LinkedIn. And at the time, I've been doing it for years, probably over 10 years. At the time, I didn't really know why. I think there's sometimes you see things you're like, this is going to be valuable. I don't really know how, right? It doesn't like, it's not immediately obvious to me, but I feel like it's couldn't not be helpful, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing it anyways. So I spend always like 5 to 10 minutes a day. Even like I said, even a decade ago, just connecting with people, building that network and so on and so forth. And so when we were trending top 5 and I was like, okay, how do we leverage this, right? Like leverage is such a powerful word in entrepreneurship, in life in general, but specifically on entrepreneurship. How do I leverage what I have right now, this visibility, this exposure that I wouldn't have otherwise? Because everything I'd read said like, you got an 8-week window of trending new and noteworthy. After that, you're not considered new and noteworthy anymore. So like, think of it like a theatrical run, right? Cinematic run for a movie. Like you got to capitalize. So I connected with, his name's evading me at the moment. And I always used to remember his name, Ted Kingsbury. Ted Kingsbury, I think is his name. Ted,
Okay.
definitely Ted. Anyways, he was involved with Shark Group, which is Damon John's, like the parent company behind what he does, right? Like Shark Branding, Shark Group, whatever. So I was like, hey man, I'd been connected with him for years. And I was like, hey, I'm trending. This is what I'm doing. It's new, but I have this exposure and I would show him screen grabs, stuff like that. I just emailed him from LinkedIn. I got his email from LinkedIn and emailed him. And he was like, yeah, man, this is great. Like, awesome. Damon would love to do it. I'm like, holy crap, really? So yeah, my secret hack, I think a lot of people drop into people's DMs and stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is like those people, they don't look at those things. So you really have to identify who the right person is. But I have found that the best way to do that is get a relevant email, primarily from LinkedIn. Been pretty successful for us. I know other people have their own methodologies of doing it, but that's been pretty effective for us. And then really nurturing relationships in between.
Yeah. So you had relationships already on LinkedIn with people, and then you just sort of called in the
In that
connection.
particular case, yeah. And then what I typically would try to do, I guess I probably should elaborate further on this. What I would typically try to do is be like, okay, who's my ultimate goal, right? Like, so if it's Tony Robbins, that's a bucket list item for me. Like Tony's the man, and Tony, I'm putting this out there. If you hear this, Tony.
I
But
think
finding people
he
that
probably
are,
does listen to my show. So
of course he does.
yeah.
But finding people that are connected to him that are more low hanging fruit. It's like the road to Tony, right? So I'd have like the road to these people that I want to have on my show at some point, right? And it's like, okay, who's a viable connection for me that's a little bit more realistic to start, right? Because he's so inaccessible. And then fortunately, then what you do is when you reach out, you're like, hey, I just had so-and-so, and I know you guys are mutual friends. And here's what he had to say about his episode with me. Here's the episode if you want to listen to what we talked about. And so that third party credibility of having that mutual connection is really, really powerful. So I've had 3 of the Shark Tanks. Damon was the first. Damon was the first we booked. Kevin Harrington actually came on before Damon, and then Barbara. So Barbara was actually, people were like, how much did you pay for Barbara? Because Barbara charges like $20,000 apparently. I didn't know this, but somebody told me that she got a quote. She gave a quote to somebody to be $20,000 to do their podcast. Barbara came on my show for free, and they pitched me on her. She was launching her podcast. The reason is because I had Damon. Through Damon in the Shark Tank mix-up, I got Cousins Maine Lobster. They were pitched by me by their PR people to come on my show. They're one of the most biggest success stories from Shark Tank.
Okay.
And then Barbara is their investor. So I said to them like, hey, like I'd love to have Barbara. So they told Barbara, and then Barbara's team pitched me, and I didn't pay $1 for it, right? So you start to kind of like navigate strategically and figure out like who knows who, mutual connections, like what's viable, what's feasible, what's possible right now in this season, and like how do I keep manipulating and maneuvering that. So a little bit more complicated than what I initially said, but primarily speaking, if you want to get in touch with somebody, I go straight to LinkedIn and then do all the other things I said.
Yeah, and you're speaking to something of like, if you can find a club, an organization, like if one Shark Tank person is on, then they're all much more likely to be,
Right.
sort of say you're okay.
Right.
Like I, at one point when I very first started, even before I had a podcast, I had this goal to write a book called How to Become a Pro Cyclist, and I was interviewing all the current national champions. This was like a decade ago, but as soon as I had my first national champion in all the emails, I was like, just interviewed the mountain biking national champion.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, well, sounds legit.
Yeah. You're so right. I'm glad you said, because your pitch is so important of like, not only leveraging that, but some people, they've done really incredible things and they don't put that in their pitch. Like I don't get, if like, if say Forbes wrote an article about you, like, dude, milk that,
Mm.
milk that until it's dry, right? Like use that. So I think sometimes people don't do that, what you're saying. And I think that's really an important point you're bringing up.
And so, are you still using LinkedIn? Are you still
Yeah.
actively?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Still
so
very,
what do you
very
do?
proud.
Like if you go and you find someone that you want to add, and you just connect with them, and then what do you do next?
Yeah, so I have a target board of people that I want to have on the show, and since I've connected, I mean, at this point, like Oprah is like a secondary connection because I've just like I spent so much time like navigating that. So I'll send a connection request, and then once they accept your connection request, you get access to their contact information. If they have a phone number listed, if they have a website list, like you get access to all that. So then we put it on our big board, and then we figure out, okay, what do we want to really talk to them about? So we'll try to find a usually those people, most people, but usually those people specifically, those people being like more mainstream guests, they only really do guest spots with lesser known people if they're promoting something or just in general, right? They'll do their rounds when they're writing a new book or launching a new program, or like if Tony's doing Unleash the Power Within, like UPW. Like, so you really have to be strategic about when. It's not just necessarily like, okay, I got their email. It's like, okay, but when are you gonna reach out to them? So that's something we do. And then we also see like relevant connections. So we'll craft our pitch. I have a video through BombBomb that we put together where it's like me presenting to big guests, like, hey, Tony, like, this is why I want you to come on my show. These are the guests that I've had, blah, blah. So he gets to see, because that's something that people don't do, is they just send like a text email. But what
Hmm.
if Tony Robbins got something from me, like authentically telling him why I want him on my show? So that's a really powerful mechanism to use. But then also leveraging, like I said, what you want to talk about, what your show has done, who you've had on your show, and then your personalized touch, right? So that's pretty much the process as far as what we've done and how it's worked. And then occasionally you'll be on the horn with somebody and they're like, hey, I really, and then you have to deliver a good product, right? You have to do a great job having them on your show and really promote it well and stuff. But then sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, hey, well, is there anything I could do for you? And you're like, man, I'd love for, I really would love this person I'm really interested in. Seems like a friend of yours or whatever. And sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, happy to send an email intro. Like that's happened a couple of times where they'll send an email intro to somebody else. And the next thing you know, I picked up somebody else that's a pretty big name guest. So there's a lot of different ways you can get creative with it, but starting Genesis point, yeah, is first connect. Primarily speaking, it needs to be at least a secondary connection. If it's not, and they're like too far to reach, or you have to like add their email or whatever, you can kind of navigate that through like creating other connections first. Same way I said before, like what's the road to Tony? Well, the road to Tony might start like finding relevant connections before I just send a connection request to Tony, so that Tony sees, oh, we have like 7 mutual connections and I know these people, so he must be legitimate, right? So you have to be very like, I love marketing, but I love marketing psychology better. Like you have to think like, what would Tony or Tony's team think seeing this request? Whether that's a connection request or whether that's an email request, like what would they think? Like what would they see? If they looked at my Twitter, what would they think? If they looked at my YouTube, like, and then putting yourself in the best light, or at least the best light you possibly can, right? So that you're presenting yourself to the best of your possible ability. So that's really all the things that we do, but really focusing on like, okay, what is our perception? How are they viewing us when they see this request?